Hey, Whiskey Ringers. I am thrilled to welcome back Impex Beverages as the Whiskey Ring Podcast presenting sponsor. Each month, we'll be talking about a new set of single casks, maybe feature a chosen distillery, or single cask from a chosen distillery. Listen for the mid-roll for more info on this month's offerings. And now, a brand new episode of the Whiskey Ring Podcast. Hey, folks. Welcome to a new episode of the Whiskey Ring Podcast. Today, we're going over to Michigan. It's been a couple episodes since we visited Michigan and the Midwest. So we're going to Traverse City Whiskey Company. Now, I've got on with me Chris Fredrickson, who is founder of Traverse City. And I must say, though, just at the start, that this is kind of a redo episode for me, if you will. I got the chance to visit Traverse City Whiskey Company back in May of 2021, I guess. It was right after I started the podcast. I got a great tour with my friend, and we got to see the barrels and everything. And only afterwards did I figure out that my audio had stopped about 10 minutes in when I tried to take a picture. So, but all that said, I am thrilled to bring on Chris Fredrickson, again, founder of Traverse City. Chris, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And on behalf of Traverse City, thank you for pronouncing the name Traverse City correctly.
No problem. How
I
do you usually get, like,
I was
Traverse or?
Traverse, and it's you are the minority here. I bet 90% of people that don't know the name end up pronouncing it incorrectly.
Fair. Yeah, we've got I mean, I've heard of you guys just generally have been fans for I've been a fan for a while and tasted a lot of products, but even before that I just had friends in Michigan, closer to the Detroit area, but we took the trip up there and they just
Yeah,
raved about the area of Traverse City. So when I was going in, I knew the name right away. Wasn't going to screw it up then. I was not going to screw it up now.
we appreciate it.
So, I thought normally, of course, it's a whiskey or a spirits podcast, but Traverse City being what it is and where it is, I thought maybe we'd start instead with the cherries.
Yeah, yes, premium cocktail cherries.
Indeed. So it's really a couple of areas to go here. It's the premium cocktail cherries, which uh, will be, I've never done a review of cocktail cherries, but I probably should. Um, these have been my go-to cocktail cherries since I visited and tasted them.
Yep.
They took the place of the Blanton's cocktail cherries. These are now the only ones I use. Although I have to say that I'm trying some from Mammoth, a Michigan,
Okay.
a Michigan competitor slash friend slash competitor. Uh,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna do a cocktail taste off with them because they talked they had great things to say about yours, of course, but they talked of their own as well. So I gotta try them out.
Yeah.
Uh,
Heck yeah.
so I was thinking about this, and I've never had the chance to ask this question before, but um, we'll get into the history and the story of Traverse City Whiskey Company. But one of the earlier stories is you had to open a tasting room and cocktail bar to keep the doors open initially.
Hmm.
And between that and having cherries around, you're, you've got a ready-made recipe for creating a cocktail cherry. So, what is the process of creating a cocktail cherry?
Yeah. So that process was actually a several year endeavor, and it involved sampling a lot of different varieties. So let's back up one step. Traverse City, the cherry capital of the world. So the one thing that Traverse City does is cherries, which means that we do a lot of cherries, but it also means that we cultivate many varieties of cherries. There are two different um, groups of cherries. There's sweet cherries and sour cherries, and we dug through many varieties to find a cherry that was appetizing both, in a dessert application, but obviously in a cocktail application as well. And one thing that we were keen on was finding a variety of cherry that after canning it after heating it up and going through a proper canning process, maintained its integrity. Didn't get mushy, didn't get weak. Still had what we always refer to as an elegant bite, or what the team in our cherry, what we call Cherryland, the cherry processors, they call us a seductive snap. And it's that bite that, after the cherries in a cocktail, and it's a lot of people enjoy it mid cocktail or the end of the cocktail, but after it's sitting in the cocktail for 5 to 20 minutes, 30 minutes, it still has a soul. It still has kind of that rigid texture. So that was, we dove through many varieties, found that texture that we liked, and would hold up over the course of time. And then we had to kind of narrow down, what do we want this cherry, how do we complement the cherry in the best way? And that was, we have the cherry rests in it's like a simple syrup. Um, and the reason that it has to is because if the cherry were just in a jar by itself, the cherries would, in volume, they would crush themselves. So they have to live in a cherry syrup. In addition to that, um, we do add our cherry whiskey on top of the cherries. And uh, while we do go through a proper canning process, that alcohol is cooked off, but we also maintain the essence of the cherry whiskey in the cherries. So I mean, that's kind of our general process. And it took about 2 years to step through it. We'd never done it before. We were one of the first in the US to create something like this. And it's always a form of flattery when others follow, but it's something that we pioneered, and it was a new process, and nobody else knew what they were doing. So we had to kind of create it from the ground up, and build a process that was both true to Traverse City and true to what we stand for. And that was kind of the blend of a local fruit meets this simple syrup or a cherry syrup meets our whiskey. And that's kind of where all three play a role.
With that, with the specific process you've got for the cocktail cherries,
Yeah.
when you were designing it, the part about the texture and holding their seductive snap is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
The textural part, I think you've elaborated on really well. I'm curious too, though, were you looking for a particular flavor profile? Like once you found a cherry or a couple of cherries maybe that could fit the texture that you were looking for and hold up, were you then
Hmm.
looking for a particular profile to either match a cocktail menu that you wanted to create, or
Hmm.
on the other side, perhaps just be a new flavor that stood out from, let's say, the Luxardos of the world?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Yeah, our mission statement from day one has led us in a very specific direction. And it's kind of, whenever I think about it personally, I kind of compare it to why bitters were invented. Bitters were invented to complement the sweet of a bourbon. So you've got, corn leads to a sweet profile in the bourbon, and then bitters, being bitter, kind of complement and combat that to equalize a cocktail. We took the same exact philosophy of the cocktail cherries, where by introducing something that is sweet, so it's a sour cherry, it's a Balaton sour cherry. That's the variety that we use. With the cherry syrup that the cherries live in is lightly sweet, but the cherry itself, you could call it a sour cherry, or you could call it a tart cherry. And so the cherry itself is tart with that subtle sweetness. So the comparison here is that balance between that subtle sweetness and the tart. And so it's a balanced flavor profile. And that's one thing that, other competitors of ours in this market, they gravitate they gravitate towards sweet, sweet, sweet. And that's fantastic, but it's a different direction than we wanted to go.
Before I leave the topic, I mean, have you tried Mammoth's cherries?
I have, yeah. They do a brandy cherry. And it's a different take. I think they do a fine job, and yeah, It is like everybody else in the market. It's a different approach to the category.
Fair enough. Again, I've gone through now two full jars of them, and
Mm,
honestly, I'm not much of a cocktail guy at home, but I've still gone through two jars of them. Just pluck them right out and pop them. So what can I
yeah,
say? Delicious.
yeah.
So I'm gonna push forward the timeline a bit, and so Traverse City founded Traverse City Whiskey Company. I'm gonna say Traverse City like it's a city. I mean, talking about the whiskey company,
Yep,
um,
yep.
more for the audience than anyone else. But so Traverse City is founded, in 2011, 2012. You start
Mhm.
distilling in 2014, and have
Yep.
just grown and grown and grown since then, to the point where to not even no pretty recently you were saying that you on the Bourbon Noobs podcast that you were creating the um, largest family owned distillery north of Kentucky. Correct.
Yes. Yep. That is accurate.
So there's a lot in between the 2 points there that has happened, and we'll get to as much as we can, of course, in the time. So I want to look at it through a couple of different lenses, and the first one is your contract producing initially, like when you first started selling whiskey, uh, you were getting it from MGP,
Yep.
and longtime listeners will know that I have no problem with. I know you prefer the phrase contract producing. Some use sourcing if it's particularly if it's from an aged stock, but I've got no problem with it either way as long as it's good whiskey. I don't care. So in the course of your relationship with MGP from the beginning where you were just buying the barrels because you needed whiskey to sell as you were creating your own profile and your own brand, uh, to now, there's been a tremendous number of brands that have popped up using MGP of any number of their products. So as someone who was using it a decade ago, when there were many fewer distilleries and non-distilling producers on the in the country,
Mhm.
what does it look like from the perspective of someone who you know knew them back then, if you will, and have seen all these other companies use it to to one effect or another?
Yeah, man, it's been a roller coaster of a relationship because, when we started when we sold our first bottle back in July of 2012, it- nobody could have predicted where the industry was headed and what that would look like. And we were I don't know if we were one of the first in the Midwest, I think, to lean pretty hard on MGP as a contract partner. And, with that saturation, I think just everybody, including us, began to scale. And the reason that I always lean on the term contract producer is because we've had this long-term partnership and produced year to year with MGP along the way. And you're absolutely right. The sourcing uh, title typically leans on, maybe a newer brand that is sourcing aged product, whereas we've been in a partnership with MGP along the way. And, like I think like a lot of brands similar to us or companies similar to MGP, we've kind of just scaled together and we've had our own independent challenges, whether it be, you know, MGP in the background has been, scaling in a very pretty miraculous way, just having to throw up warehouse after warehouse after warehouse. And, one thing that we've always appreciated is that our core bourbon recipe has been at the heart of what they've produced. 75% corn, 21% rye, 4% malted barley. That makes up the it does make up the majority of our the base flavor, sorry, the base spirit for what's in front of me now, our bourbon, our barrel proof bourbon, our cherry whiskey, our peach infused whiskey, and our apple infused whiskey, along with a couple others that have been that are legacy at this point. But um, yeah, it's been pretty interesting just working, it's typically a lot of the same people too that we worked with in such a almost boutique way back in the day before MGP really had the legs that they have today. And building those relationships and just kind of working in harmony. And we both had our challenges, and but through it all, we both kind of maintained loyal to one another, and it's yeah, it's been an adventure for sure, but it's been fun. It's also been fun to watch different groups pop up around the country and lean on a partner like MGP who does several things really well, and just kind of see their take on it, whether that be infusion, like our infusion series, the cherry, the apple, and the peach, or finishes like a port barrel finish or share, whatever that looks like to the respective organization.
And at the time, I think this was when, oh, this is also on Bourbon Noob. I'm just checking my notes on this. So, you'd started out with, obviously, before distilling, 100% MGP, 100% MGP bourbon, and then had moved over the years to 50-50 blend in 2017, 60-40, then 70-30. And then as of about 2 months ago, as of recording at least, you'd said you're now down to about a 90-10 split in terms of your own distillate and MGP's distillate in your stocks. Is that kind of where you'd like to stay for the moment?
That's where we have to stay for the moment. Yeah, they're our cherry whiskey took off in a pretty big way back in right around that 2018, 2017, 2018 time, which is when that shift happened between our own juice and MGPs. And we're now in this limbo phase where we're bringing this new facility online, and we'll have a great deal of distilling capacity, and at the same time just kind of need to let our own engine run and both cycle through existing inventory and then help use that to realize our new distillery. So the transition, I don't see us straying from that current roadmap at anytime soon.
And with that growth, has that meant, in some ways, I see there's obviously less MGP going into each bottle, but at the same time, you're also producing many more bottles and adding more distillate and more volume to your stocks. So, in terms of the relationship with MGP distilling for you, because I know you now at this point you're taking new make, not aged stuff from them, but new make and aging it in Michigan. Has the volume that you're getting from MGP decreased, or is it still kind of staying the same just by sheer nature of how many bottles you're producing?
Yeah, I mean we leaned on them pretty hard for a few years over the last probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. Again, they were a great partner, and we haven't produced with them in a little bit, and I think the goal is to try to be self-sufficient between now and when we bring our new distilling system online. So I I don't want to say that our partnership is done, but it's we're really eager to cut our teeth in the distilling world and just kind of showcase what we're capable of on our own. So that's our go forward strategy. It's something that through 2023, I'm not sure if we're going to produce again until we um, start laying down our own barrels in mass. The new system that we're bringing online is capable of producing up to 70 barrels a day. So it's a big shift from the 3 or 4 we're capable of today.
Yeah, that's huge. I think when I was there, I know I saw the stills. They were Cote stills.
Yeah, good
Is that
memory.
right?
Yeah, yep,
And kind of a pot still hybrid, or a pot
yep. Pot column
column hybrid
combo.
rather. Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean 3 to 4 barrels for the volume that you're producing. If you want to become the biggest distillery, family-owned distillery north of Kentucky, obviously you got to up the numbers a little bit there. But 70, I mean that's 70 is a solid number there for sure. So just the last couple questions regarding the MGP relationship, just because it's where a lot of people start,
Yeah.
even nowadays, is by nature of it being a very well-known recipe, let's say.
Hmm.
And this can apply to the bourbon, but it can also apply to the rye stocks as well. As you've transitioned from that initial buying of the aged stock to new make, to blending the new make with your own distillate to age, has the profile changed over the years for your whiskeys? And well, I'll start with that. Has the profile changed over the years? Then I'll get to a second question there.
There's several ways to look at that. I'd say the profile it's always evolving. Up in northern Michigan, we have this crazy climate, major temperature fluctuations, and just a lot of fun variables that are unique to Traverse City. So that's one piece of this. The other part is we did make a point to diversify with cooperage back in 2020. Well, actually, it started in 2015 during the wood shortage. There was a flood in 2015 that caused a major drought in the oak market, and that forced us to look at a handful of players. Um, Anywhere, we used to live uh, with Independent Stave as a primary partner, and then diversified out to Canton and Calvin and Sequin Moreau and a few others, and or yeah, EBC. And so, over the years, we kept trying, partnering with different cooperages, and because of that, the flavor profile, kind of the main, like the vein of the standard bourbon, has continued to evolve in a very fun way, and it's really our blenders that are due the credit to maintain continuity in what we taste, and at the same time, no two barrels are created equal. So it makes it so it's a discovery process.
Sure. I mean, there was a time, and I forget which podcast this was on, but you called Canton in particular, Canton Cooperage, the Ferrari of
The
Cooperage.
Ferrari, yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah, and they are.
And Kelvin was an early guest on this podcast because I just wanted to know more about coopering. Never thought of it and never
Mhm.
knew anything, so they were fun. And I've gotten to talk to Greg Snyder, who's I know he
Oh
had
yeah,
some influence
he's
on you
great.
early on, and
Yep.
it's one of the few master distillers that has that experience of being also head of a coopering facility. So,
Yep.
I was going to ask this a little bit later, but I think it fits now, which is with not only the variety of products you have, which is significant in its own right, uh, when you have to deal with those different cooperages, each of them bringing their own wood, their own styles, their own whatever it may be. Um, is there kind of a method to deciding which cooperage you're going to use for which product, or is it deliberately kind of, I don't want to say scattershot because that's not the word that's right, but is there a process to choosing when you use each cooperage?
Yeah, that's no, that's a great question, and the the easy answer is it's deliberate. It's deliberately scattered, and the reason being we just haven't been around long enough, and we haven't partnered with each cooperage long enough to say with consistency, this is what we can expect. And because every barrel also goes through its own life cycle, right? We think we're going to expect after our 2 to 6 or 7 year life cycle, but it's it's really something that will require probably another couple of years with all of these probably 5 or 6 partners that we work with barrels, and they are all different, and they're also Yeah, it's interesting because the other variables about entry proof, when the barrel's laid down, when they typically enter a warehouse in short order, and where they live in the racks. There's there's just a lot of factors that dictate what's right for the right product at the right time.
Sure. And that goes into I like how this is flowing very well so far. This is a good sign. So this flows into this idea of the whiskey's talking to specific audiences.
Mhm.
And while there's the cooperage aspect, so starting from the beginning, but also the maturation process, as you said, where a barrel is in the rickhouse and where it is in its life cycle will make a big difference.
Mhm.
And so, with with that, this is also from Bourbon Noobs. You were saying that, for example, with the bourbons, the barrel proof bourbon and your quote unquote regular straight bourbon are not, it's not the same product in the sense that it's not like the barrel proof is just a higher strength version of of
Mhm.
one and the other one is a proof down version of the other. It depends on where they are in the life cycle, where they are in the rick house, and they have a purpose.
Mhm.
And I just love to hear you expand on that a bit.
Yeah, so the starting at the top, the major qualifier for the difference is going to be age. One, our regular bourbon, the 86 proof, is a minimum age of 4 years, where the barrel proof is age between 5 and 6 years. That's the first easy hitter. So that, the barrel proof has an extra 2 years in the barrel. That's a lot of love from the oak.
Mhm.
The the second qualifier is just going to be the location that they live in the rick house. So the barrel proof, I'm sure you can probably see it on camera, but the barrel proof, it's a deeper amber. Now, of course, that comes from age. It also comes from the fact that the barrel proof barrels live higher in elevation. Um, we have four levels, four elevations in the brick house, and the barrel proof barrels live up top. Without getting too deep in the weeds, um, in Michigan, because we have these fortified seasons, we have a higher relative humidity and lower temperatures than Kentucky and Tennessee. You have two compounds in the barrel, and based on those conditions, you have these two compounds, ethanol and water, each which will evaporate at a different rate based on the climate. Down in Kentucky, it's very common to see a bourbon in the barrel come out at 130 or 135 proof. Whereas up here in Michigan, a bit colder, again, the high relative humidity, um, alcohol evaporates first. So we lose proof. But again, without getting too deep in the weeds, there's several schools of thought that suggest that water plays better in wood than alcohol. So this enhanced aging cycle for the whiskey for both the barrel proof and what we call the bottle proof, the 86 proof, um, it's complemented a lot by the climate. So we've got the bottle proof, which is 4 years old, and these barrels are, it's a much more highly distributed product where the barrel proof is it's just a bit more sophisticated. It's a little bit older and it lives at a higher elevation. Therefore, it has a more complex flavor profile and just more depth. Whereas the bourbon it's a classic expression. It's a it's a daily driver. It's very very versatile to a lot of audiences for cocktails, pouring neat, whatever it might be.
And when you were kind of designing the SKUs over the years, did you have that idea of uh, tailoring each product to to a particular audience, or is that just an organic growth?
I would say that I guess um, it's been part of the strategy, sort of, but at the end of the day, it was just kind of an evolution of the portfolio. Um, the barrel proof bourbon came about because we cracked some barrels and we tried it. We launched in 2012, in July of 2012 with the straight bourbon, and we were opening up these incredible barrels, and then somebody was like, "Why are we adding water to this? It's so good." And so we decided to bottle some and create a barrel proof bourbon, and it the whole portfolio has been kind of that same evolution where we try something. We're really big on playing. We love experimenting, and it's what we call thoughtful spaghetti. So you're not throwing spaghetti at the wall. You're throwing thoughtful spaghetti at the wall, and it's something that's fun and near and dear. And if it hits, so to speak, and people like it, fantastic. And if they don't, that's okay. We enjoyed trying, and we enjoyed trying to make it happen.
I was trying to find the pictures and I just ran out of time, but the pictures from when I was up there and we got to pull from a cask. It was definitely a cask of a particular finishing. I want to say it was something red, as dumb as that sounds.
Yes.
um,
Yep. No, no, no. You're right.
yeah, but it was a barrel that was laying on its side. It wasn't palletized. It was on its side. It was probably a wine or a sherry because it was larger than a typical 53 gallon. I'll have
Hmm.
to look up which one that was, but whatever it was delicious. And Curtis said, we got one barrel of this. Gonna try it and see if it works. And as far as I know, that hasn't come out to market yet. So maybe that's still sitting there waiting.
It is in the queue. That's for sure.
All right, I'm excited for that one because, like I said, I tried to right out of the barrel. God help you, don't add water to that one either. Uh, so with the before we go on to the ride, I just wanted to take a quick tangent and go to, what do your warehouses or brick houses look like? What's your aging structure?
Yeah. So our current usable rick house at the facility that I'm at right now that you visited, what we call TC2, we house about 1,000 barrels, and the barrels are all categorized by what the product requires at the time. Um, we have, of course, our younger whiskey, which we use for the infusion series, the cherry, the peach, and the apple, and those live in their own quadrant. And then we have a whole section for the bourbons that again are all um, they live they live in a very strategic way so that what needs to be pulled at a certain date, it's ready, and then what the younger stuff is behind it. So it's just constantly being rolled out um, to support the bottling needs at the time. So that the rick house that we use here at TC2, like I said, holds about 1,000 barrels, and then we just finished erecting our new barrel warehouse at the new campus, which is what we call TC3. And at TC3, um, I'll have our mutual friend Aaron share a photo of it, but we just finished building a 20,000 square foot barrel warehouse, 4 levels, 3 racks per level, with a barrel elevator, and it is, yeah, it's beautiful, and we're eager to start moving barrels in Q1. So it'll be, yeah, it'll kind of just be race ready for the next evolution of aging barrels up in Traverse City.
And this is going back again to 3 years ago to when you were on with Dad's drinking bourbon. But at that time, I think it was when you were kind of designing this warehouse and imagining what it was going to look like and new campus. At that point, you had told John and Zeke you were still deciding whether or not to implement, temperature controls or to allow just natural
Mm-hmm.
temperature variation to occur. What did you end up going with?
Bare bones.
Bare
Nothing.
bones.
No. Yeah. Zero temperature control. It's the barrels and the northern Michigan climate. So the way that a traditional rick house is built is the racks are built, and then metal is slapped on the side. And for all intents and purposes, that's exactly what we did.
All right, and like you said, you got some serious temperature variation there, so you can, it's not going to take it like in Scotland. It's not going to take 10, 12 years necessarily to age. You got good whiskey at 4 years old, or even younger, with some of the products.
Yeah.
With let's see, keeping in mind that the warehouses are, so they're open to the, no, they're not open, but they're pretty much exposed with no control. Um,
Mhm.
I just thought of this question, but sometimes when you have a warehouse that's very near a body of water,
Mhm.
the barrels can take on some of the effect of that water.
Yep.
So I'm thinking in particular, for example, Ironclad Distillery in Virginia is on the Brackish St. James River, right on Newport News. And when I first tried their bourbon, there was a flavor that I couldn't quite identify. It was just something very new. And finally, when I talked to them, they were like, "Oh, that's probably what it is," because you've tasted salinity in scotches and what have you, and I was tasting that. Do you already see, or do you anticipate some kind of flavor imparting from like Michigan?
That's I have not been asked that question before, nor has that crossed my mind. Um, because it's certainly possible. But with this one of the largest fresh water, um, or one of the largest fresh bodies of water in the world, Lake Michigan and Traverse City, I guess, prides itself on kind of the clarity of the water. Um, when you're out in Traverse Bay, which is an extension of Lake Michigan, and you're out 30, 40, 50 feet, you can see the bottom. There's no, there's no pollution, no, it's pristine character. And so I'd be curious, we're not far. TC3 is less than a quarter mile from Lake Michigan, and it'll be very interesting to see what a role that plays in the maturation process.
You just need a couple of good breezes off Traverse
Mhm.
Bay and get some
Yeah, yeah.
good flavor there. I genuinely am curious because again, I've gotten it in other whiskeys, and it's it's never something anyone kind of anticipates happening, and then suddenly they're like, why is there salt in my whiskey, or why is there this
Hmm.
flavor? Um, so I'm very curious to see what happens. The other reason I'm curious is, we're talking Traverse City Whiskey Company, but I'm inevitably bringing up Mammoth because it's also Michigan, and there are elements that cross over in the thought processes. And one of them was they were kind enough to send a sample of their peated single malt to try.
Mm.
And again, flavor wise, it was Lake Michigan peat, and I'd never had Lake Michigan peat, let alone I realized I'd never had freshwater peat before. Only whatever they got in Scotland, really.
Right. Yeah.
And I'll be honest, and I was very honest with them too. It just wasn't for me. Uh, they were like, "It's fine, not everything is for everyone," but it did have a very particular flavor to it. That again, maybe that's something that comes through. There is something that can come from even a very clean water. That maybe it's a freshness or a like, who knows? But
Yeah, that's
that's
very
me.
interesting.
Yeah,
It'll be something to look out for, that's for sure.
yeah. Hey, who knows? All right, so again, there are so many SKUs that you guys have, and I haven't tasted something I didn't like yet. Uh, we're not going to get to all of them, but I did want to touch in between the products on kind of the ethos of how you do business. And this is going, I had to find a esoteric podcast for this one, but the Terrapin Small Biz Connection was in
Wow, you
2020.
you did your research.
I
These
know.
are Pete's. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
So, you were talking about not just, obviously it's a business podcast, so it's not talking about the whiskeys so much as things behind it. And this hadn't really crossed my mind as a topic to talk about until I recently met up with Heather Green from, among other things, right now, Milam Green Distillery in Texas. And she said, I'm tired of people talking to me about being a distiller. Like I've been asked every question. I'd rather, no one's ever asked me about being a whiskey CEO and whiskey business person. So so my first question for you with that is, you spoke on that podcast about particulars that distilleries face that others don't, such as zoning, for example. What were are you still learning things about the whiskey business and figuring out, as you create this new campus, new requirements and new things that you've got to kind of just go with?
Yeah, no, you're tugging on my heartstrings, man. It's this is kind of this is at the this is at the soul of where my time is going right now. And one thing that I've learned, because this is going to be our fourth location that we've opened. We've got TC1, our still house and tasting room downtown, cocktail bar downtown Traverse City. We've got TC2, our production facility, bottling facility, and barrel aging facility that I'm at right now. TC3, which is the campus that we're opening, and well, we call it TC4, or our Detroit tasting room. But we've had now 3.5 experiences. And TC3 it's been a fun daily reminder that we are pioneers. And so much about being a pioneer is partnering with your local township or your local county. And it's a partnership that requires proactive communication and education. And so many times, now it'll be the third time that we're entering a new township. It happens to be the second time in this county, but it's an education game, and we're all sort of learning it together. And one thing that a principle that we've held from day one has been to not be scared to ask for help. And so we've leaned on a lot of industry experts to help guide us through this process that have been through it in many, many, many different municipalities, dealt with the layers of jurisdiction, whether that be construction code, building code, mechanical, electrical, the fire marshal, which is like the core, the key relationship is the fire marshal, and just really working with, not against, but with these groups, and making sure that you're aligned on every move. Because without that alignment, everybody loses. So yeah, it's what we're working on right now, and we're probably 25% through the education process with our local municipalities, and it's certainly a challenge, especially nobody, like, we just put up this 20,000 square foot warehouse. There's nothing like it in Michigan, so nobody has a framework. No employee of the government here locally has a guide from anybody in Michigan to say, what did you do? How did it go? What were the challenges? And so again, this has happened to us several times. We, as the pioneers, just kind of have to learn the hard way and muscle through as a partner and work with work with everybody. And it's not always great, but it's part of the process. And yeah, it is fun, but as a business owner, it is challenging because we can't go to anybody and just say, what should we do? It's a harmonious conversation.
And that also means, of course, you don't know yet if any neighbors are going to end up with some of that black mold. So
yeah, no, we're opening the bread factory, and we're educating everybody around us to make sure everybody's in the know, Um, yeah, we've got a really, really nice community over in our little pocket north of Traverse City.
And when Traverse City was founded, and you're creating these structures and starting to age whiskey there and sell it, um, inevitably you're going to come up with those communities. You're going to start talking with them. Was there any initial like resistance to Traverse City being there as a business and as a distillery?
At our no, I mean actually I was going to say at our new location, but not not at any location. We've been we've always tried to be good stewards of the community generally and be respectful um, and yeah, just promote promote a positive working relationship with everybody around us, including our neighbors downtown, that like downtown Traverse City and down in Detroit and out here in the county that I'm, where I'm currently at. And there's just been a lot of positive vibes and warm welcomes from everybody.
That's awesome. I know not every distillery can say that, new or heritage distilleries. So
Yeah,
worth noting.
yeah.
So there was another topic that came up in that particular podcast, which I wanted to bring up because I I'll say upfront, I agree with the perspective that you're going to bring. I know you don't know what I'm talking about yet, but I agree with the perspective. Um, but in today's context, it might be a little controversial. So the idea was that you're starting at the local level and seeing kind of what the environment is, and it being that kind of more like the business environment as opposed to necessarily the climatic environment, and looking at what fits best for the business, not necessarily what and how that might differ from what you want to achieve. So the example you gave was you don't necessarily source your grain locally just for the
Mm,
sake of sourcing it locally and saying you're local, and that you can retain a strong local focus without being, the word used was myopic about it. And now, having said that out loud, you can see how like I do actually agree with what you're saying there, but it can be a little bit controversial, especially nowadays where everyone's like, where are you getting your grain from? Where, are you localized? Are you getting the water from a local, all this kind of stuff. So do you, do you still feel that way? And how do you maintain that strong local focus without necessarily, getting the grain from within 50 miles of the distillery? It is December, which means you're looking for the perfect whiskey to give the people you love this season, including yourself. The bourbon hunt is coming to an end, and some special releases are still to come, but I'm here to offer a different, uniquely sustainable option from our presenting sponsor, Impex Beverages. Ardnamurchan Distillery is one of Scotland's newest producers, located in the Highlands and founded less than a decade ago in 2014. From the start, sustainability has been at the core of their operations. Local, renewable energy fuels the distillery, and the nearby river generates hydroelectric power. Biomass boilers use wood chips from local forestry, and stillage feeds livestock across the peninsula. Their first single malt whiskies came out in 2020 and were immediate successes. The distillery's two signature styles, a peated and unpeated Highland, are matured in two sets of casks. 65% of the liquid goes into ex-bourbon and 35% into ex-sherry casks, blended at the end for an impressive spirit redolent with fruitiness, waxy character, and true West Coast Scottish charm. As an aside, for you blockchain lovers out there, each bottle's journey can be tracked via a QR code on the bottle from field to glass. I've now got 2 Ardnamurchans on my shelf, their core single malt available at most stores nationwide, and a single cask bottling from the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, another sponsor of the Whiskey Ring podcast. For that holiday gift, consider a single cask release from the Impex collection. A 6-year-old first fill Oloroso Spanish oak cask, this bottle comes from some of Ardnamurchan's earliest stocks. Only 300 bottles are available, from cask number 86P, bottled at a hefty 58.2% ABV. Check out the website or reach out if you want help grabbing a bottle. Happy holidays, everyone. Enjoy your whiskey responsibly, and remember the 2 rules of the Whiskey Ring podcast. Drink what you like, and drink it how you like it. Hey, Whiskey Ringers. I hope you've been taking advantage of that podcast-only code for the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society. They've got around 20 bottlings coming out each month, and there's never a shortage of new things to explore. For the holiday season, December, January, we've got even more bottles than usual available to try and available to buy. If you are a US-based listener, there are at least 12 casks just for this month's release, plus additional ones coming out. If you are a UK listener or an EU listener, there are over 30, a ridiculous number of bottles that you can try and get your hands on. Remember to use code WRP at checkout to get 25% off your annual membership. And when you get that special bottle, post a picture on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and tag us at Whiskey in My Wedding Ring, Whiskey Ring Podcast, and hashtag Whiskey Ring to let us know you've got that great bottle in hand.
Yeah, so to an extent, or I'd say, I still predominantly feel that way, and I think that the easy example that I give is the grain. Do we source from our neighbor? Not always, as much as possible. Our approach has always been best in class, and sacrificing that, uh, to maintain that hyper local uh, story, I guess, um, is it's something that we haven't that we've really prided ourselves on, just creating the best, and with a lot of the ingredients that drive our our innovation engine, our production engine, it holds very true. I mean, it's all a lot is sourced from within several miles of where I'm at, and what's not is is a future discussion. Especially especially as we bring this new facility online, there's going to be a lot of fun new partnerships that we pursue. We're the spent grain, as an example. This is just a fun, easy example, but the spent grain, from a day of production will feed north of 200 heads of cattle. So it's this new relationship with a lot of local farmers, to provide a feed source, right? So that's kind of the output. But then the input is working with different, um, Michigan grain producers that have seen what's going on nationwide or even in the Midwest, and have begun scaling up to support an operation this big. So I'll tell you, while it hasn't always been in our DNA to do everything we do, in a hyper local way, that is the goal. I mean, that's what we're working toward, especially with this new, grain to bottle distillery that has a very functional high volume output.
Sure. Again, I was curious about it because I heard it and it goes against, forgive the pun, goes against the grain of where people are going right now with that hyperlocal or bust kind of thought process.
Hmm.
So it's good to hear that it's more nuanced than that. It's not, doesn't mean that you're going to commodity grain or just to anything you can find. You're still being picky about where the
Hmm.
grain is. And again, we're keeping grain as the example. Just doesn't mean that it's from the farm next door,
Hmm.
and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
And I will say that farmers, yeah, they usually do like having, or at least cattle farmers like having distilleries nearby because their cows remain really happy. So
Yeah,
just thought
amen.
I'd, sort of thought I'd be curious to know if there's how do I put this? There are more production or better yield, I don't know, from cattle being fed spent whiskey mash as opposed to and getting a little buzzed half the time versus traditional feed. um I don't know. Let's find a cow and ask them. Who knows? So,
Exactly.
anyway, with that, there is a question of cost, of course, and it's worth noting. I mean, I don't have the price in front of you, but I'm pretty sure none of your whiskeys are above like 85, $80, something like that. And that dovetails with a conversation of, where does the grain come from, where the barrel's coming from, quality versus availability, and all the factors that go into it. Um, and I want to go two routes on that. The first one is to go cost down, which is the fact that you sell 3 bottle sets of 200 milliliter
Mhm.
bottles.
Mm.
Now, from a business perspective, I mean, I've been asking almost every distillery that I've been to that doesn't do something like this. I'm like, hell, do it in 50 or 100 milliliter. I don't care, but do that so that people can try stuff, especially when it was during COVID and during lockdowns when you couldn't go anywhere. I thought, do
Mhm.
the tasting kits. It's an incredible opportunity for people to try your whiskeys. And I figure I know it's more costly for the producer because you've got smaller bottles, smaller volume. So I get that part. But at the same time, I think like if I bought a 200 milliliter bottle of whiskey and didn't like it, I'd be okay with that. If I
Mhm.
bought a 200 and did like it, I'd be like, oh, great. I got to try it before buying a 750. If I bought a 750 and I don't like it, especially at the prices that some things are commanding nowadays, it's at minimum disappointing and sometimes downright frustrating. So,
Absolutely.
getting to try it, if you can't go, if you're not at Detroit or in Traverse City and you can't try it on site, getting to try it in these smaller packs is something I really encourage others to do. I'm curious how you came around to the idea of doing that.
Yeah, it was, I mean, honestly, it was exactly, it barked up that very tree of wanting to share so much of, so much of the, especially our infusion series, the cherry, the peach, and the apple, are all about, I guess, all of our lower proof spirits. It's all about approachability. And the idea behind the 200 ml gift set, which by the way, just um, in transparency, we do have uh, two sets of the three
Yes. I should have said
pack.
that, but yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, we have three sets now.
Oh,
It's all about approachability and showcasing what we can showcase in one occasion. So we have the barrel proof 3 pack kit, the bourbon, wheat, and rye. We have the bottle proof, the bourbon cherry rye. But then this year, just as a fun holiday push, we released what we call the cake free fruitcake. And it's the infusion series in 200 ml bottles in a 3 pack.
sounds
But it's,
delicious.
yeah, just it lets you share, also to your point earlier about the 50 ml and the 100 ml. 50 ml is a very small portion. If you're trying to share it, it's not very shareable. I mean,
Mhm.
maybe you and one other person, but the 200 ml, in our opinion or from our perspective, it's enough to share with a small group, and you can taste it together, and you can do that across 3 different expressions.
Yeah, I really advocate for it. I think it's worth the investment, especially for smaller distilleries that have a lot of
Hmm.
products, or even with a few products that want to get their name out there.
Hmm.
Um, and
Yep.
only a few others do it. I know like AD Laws does it. I think they're just called Laws now, but Laws Whiskey House. But very few do it, and it's something I'd like to see more of. Uh, so take that for what you will, those who listening. But
Yeah.
there's definitely, I can tell you, there's a market for it for sure. And if you need to expand that market, just market it as try it first. Worked for Coke, it'll work for you. So, all right. So, with about 20-30 minutes left, I wanted to jump back into the products themselves. So, in addition to the
Mhm.
infusion series. So I've gotten to chase the cherry whiskey a couple of times now, and have loved it every time, despite me being a self-professed proof whore and it being a lower proof. Not saying I wouldn't love a 1995 100 proof version of it, just saying, but it's very, very good where it's at. Uh,
Do you mean something like the barrel proof cherry?
so not quite. So I have the barrel proof
Okay.
one too, and I do love that. But
Okay.
there's something different. Like for me, the barrel proof is very much, for me at least, a bourbon with that uh the very, very large tea bag of cherries infused in it. So but it still kind of leans to the bourbon side for me, with a cherry
Hmm.
flavor to it. Whereas the cherry whiskey is more about the freshness of the cherries, and it's brighter. It tastes more like the cherries themselves, as opposed to the bourbon being very strong on it. Each has their
Yep.
place for sure, but I think there is something in the middle, maybe. And I don't know
Mm.
if it's lowering the bourbon or upping the cherry. I don't know which direction to go there, but there's something in the middle that I know I would love to try, and I think the guys at Dad's Drinking Bourbon would love to try too. So um, maybe there's something there.
Noted. Noted. Yeah.
Yeah. But so I've gotten to try the cherry whiskey a couple times. I did get to try the apple infused whiskey while I was there. I haven't tried the peach one.
Mm.
I think was it was it out at that time? It might have just been out of stock. It's possible.
No, no,
Mm.
it we launched it in May or June of this year.
Okay, so that's pretty new
Yeah,
then.
so
Okay,
yeah, a little bit after your visit.
all right. Well, I'll have to try some of that too, because there's a there's not a lot of infused bourbon or infused whiskeys that are that good, frankly.
Mm. Mm.
You know, um, and I do really enjoy the cherry whiskey. I remember I enjoyed the apple whiskey. I ended up going with the bottle of the rye instead, but I did enjoy the apple whiskey. So I'm curious what the peach will be like.
Yeah.
But the other two products that I really wanted to shine a light on were, number one, the wheat whiskey.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
not a lot of people doing wheat whiskey more recently, but still not a lot. And even fewer doing it at barrel proof or barrel
Right.
strength. And I was thinking about this when I was down in Kentucky 3.5 months ago or so. Did the Heaven Hill Bottle Your Own experience.
Oh,
Um, the
nice.
the first time I did it twice, and the first time I did the Bernheim barrel proof because you can't get it, and it was delicious. I chose it on taste, but also you can't get it. And the second time I went with Larceny, but um, with the when they were doing the explanation of this is the product, this product, whatever, the guide said, there are really only two wheat whiskeys out there right now. There's us and Woodford Reserve.
Mm.
And once we went into the room and I could take him aside for a second, I said, no disrespect meant, but that's not true. you know, you've got, you got Traverse City, you've got not old, sorry, Midwest, uh, you know, wow, I'm completely blanking on, Middle West. I'm sorry. I'm just thinking about Middle West doing the wheat whiskey, and a
Hmm.
couple of others too. And I said, it may not be at the same volume as you guys are doing it at, but they're out there and they're getting there. So
Yes.
in this northern climate, even with four seasons, what made you decide to do a wheat whiskey? And not only a wheat whiskey, but not a wheated bourbon, but a wheat whiskey.
Yeah. No, the wheat the wheat whiskey came into play. It was kind of it's I hate to use the term again, but it was also part of this idea of thoughtful spaghetti. We like wheat. We did both wheated whiskeys and wheated bourbons. The recipe on our wheat whiskey is the 95% wheat, 5% malted barley. And I personally have always been a huge fan of wheated whiskeys and just like seeing the direction that they're going, which is not nearly as traditional as a bourbon, certainly not as spicy or buttery as a rye, and it's newer to your point. It's not widespread. It's unique. It's very challenging in this crazy climate of everybody's doing 1,000 different finishes and putting their twist on how the product's built, just like our infusion series. That's our twist. Um, but how do we do something that is purely um, it's focused just on the whiskey, not in any finish or infusion, and and also, how do we create something that we enjoy and that we're passionate about, and it happens to be a wheat whiskey. And we were drinking, it's the same way the cocktail cherries were created. We were using an Italian competitor at our cocktail bar, and we were using a lot of their cherries. And we're a whiskey company based in the cherry capital of the world. Why are we using cherries from out of the country? So we made our own. And why are we drinking a wheat whiskey from a competitor? Why don't we just make our own? So we tried it, and here we are.
And I mean, and now it's got to be a couple years old. When did you start distilling that?
Yeah, we produced our first batch with MGP back in 2015 with I'm pretty sure they were the Canton barrels, and we only produced 10 because
Mhm.
at the time it was, you never know where these projects are going to go. That's one thing that I always kick myself for is whenever we make something fun like the wheat whiskey, we
Mhm.
never produce enough. Ever, 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 not even close. There's always the want. Why didn't we do this years ago? We're idiots. This is ridiculous. We keep making the same mistake. And fast forward to 2017, that was when we decided to kick it up a notch, and we tasted the 2015 along the way, and it was so far so good. It was great, and so we produced a really strong handful of barrels, and this was part of a release 2 months ago across the country. We did a big single barrel release from New York to California, and released probably now it's probably been close to 50 barrels of the 95.5, the 95% wheat, 5% malted barley. And it's
Yeah, I
just
mean,
fun and cool. And yeah,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
no, it's good. When I was there, I got to taste it because there was one bottle left on the tasting cart. But
Mm.
I was looking around. I said, I don't see it on any of the shelves, and Kurt was like, "Yeah, this is the last bottle um, from that batch." So I was very happy to get the chance to taste it again. Now, I mean, I know it's a different batch, but still, to taste it, it's still just as good. Those tasting notes and tasting notes for everything that's been that I've had, plus what's been provided, it's going to be coming out when this episode comes out,
Mhm.
and it was fun to try it. It was also fun to try it against some of those competitors,
Mhm.
and it was really very few competitors to try it against because again, there's so few of them to begin with, plus so few at barrel strength.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
So I would argue that a there isn't really a wide market competitor for it. There's the Bernheim, for example. If you want the cast strength, you got to do the bottle your own experience. Can't buy it anywhere
Mhm.
else. Woodford's is not uh, cast strength. Middle West does not put out a cast strength version of it, I don't think.
Mhm.
Um, so, I mean, there's just not a comparison that's readily available, which makes it unique in the market and thus worth seeking out.
Yes.
So, I know I'm sharing with a couple of my friends, bring it to a bottle share so they can taste some barrel strength wheat whiskey, and I'm sure they will enjoy it as I did. Uh, one other question on there was, well, actually two. So one being, you said you liked weeded bourbons and weeded whiskeys in the past. So why did you try a weeded bourbon as well, or did you just say, we want to try a wheat whiskey and leave it at that?
Yeah, the latter, really. Um, it's one. I'm gonna Tarantino this story, but we produce a lot of bourbon in house, so therefore we taste a lot of bourbon in house. The second most produced spirit under our roof is rye, both 100% rye and a 95.5. The 95% rye, 5% malted barley, and we just kind of get it ends up just being like the a single lane or two lanes of profiles that we get. I don't To say numb is not right, but it's very consistent. And so our crew, one thing that we advocate internally is at the end of our day, we host a group meeting we call it tailgate. And at the tailgate, our team is encouraged to bring fun bottles that they find from around the country and just share with everybody. And it's a really exciting event because, again, we get siloed with bourbon and rye. And so we'll sample through it, and it's our team's moment to try something outside the box. To your point, you got to go to the distillery to bottle it, to buy it. It's not available anywhere else. And over the course of time, different spirits like a wheated whiskey or a wheated bourbon are just they're they're fun and elegant and they pop. And it was just something that after trying several, we were just like we got to do more of this. And that's kind of how this popped up. I mean, that was like the birth of several innovations beyond just the wheat.
That's what it seems. And the last question on the wheat is, do you still use a different cooperage for it?
We have diversified um, several. The Canton was what we started with. I think we moved on to Kelvin and two others in 2017, and we've only produced a little bit between 2017 and now. But it's hard because the wheat is not as robust in the market as the bourbon. So
Mhm.
to toy too much feels risky, right? Because what if you stray off the path of this pet project and it gets weird? You just never know.
Hey, it makes sense. And
Yeah.
I have it in the note here that my question was supposed to be, and I truncated it, but it was, does it still use a different cooperage than the rye does? And I'm
Oh
not
no,
sure.
they share. There's absolutely overlap between the wheat and the rye.
All right. So in that case, let's dive into that last product, the rye. And
Cool.
so people have, listeners, they're gonna know I love been on a rye kick recently. I think it's tailing off, to be honest. I'm getting to Scotch again for the next probably month or so, but uh this was like a 4 month rye kick. And among them, I got Traverse City during there. Also got a lot of different varietals like Rosen ryes, Dankos, and Ryman's,
Hmm.
Wheelers, all these different ryes. And so, in terms of the rye that you guys are using, you're starting again with MGP 95.5, very classic, moving to a house made 100% rye, and then
Yep.
blending those together over time. So, the question, or the series of question, kind of mirrors what we do with the bourbons, which was, has that profile changed over time, and where is it where is it now, and where is that profile going?
Yeah. So we do have two ryes. One is our barrel proof rye. The other is our bottle. Well, again, what we call our bottle proof rye, which is 90 proof. And the the barrel proof is predominantly, it's really focused on the 95.5, whereas the North Coast rye at 90 proof is that 50-50 blend of the 100% rye and the 95.5. And the flavor profile of that rye has been pretty consistent over time. The reason we blended the two recipes together was to get that balance. You know, you typically have with a rye, you have a butter profile and you have a spice profile. And I think a lot of rye drinkers gravitate toward typically one or the other, maybe both, but typically one or the other. And our goal with the North Coast rye was to blend the two to kind of create the best of both worlds and provide a light spice with a butter finish. And it has stayed relatively consistent over time. Just being a lower volume product and having this great blending team, it's really helped that the continuity in the profile, and I believe it will stay consistent going forward.
And when you started off distilling, your own 100% rye, you had another distillery that was, pardon me, that was helping with fermentation capacity. This was a couple of years ago now.
Yep.
Was that also MGP or was that a third distillery in the mix?
That was a third distillery in the mix. Yeah.
All right. I'm guessing
Yeah,
can't tell
it's
me
a,
which one.
no, I can. They have since retired um, out of Wisconsin, Death's Door.
Oh yeah, I knew about them. Yeah.
Yep. So I don't think they're currently, I don't think they're in operation any longer, but we worked with them for many years. And we also did, yeah, we did work with um, Terrasentia a little bit. They're out of, they're down south, but they handled the fermentation for us, and then we distilled um, the mash, and that's been the base of our product for a long time. And um, yeah, we haven't distilled the we haven't distilled 100% rye in about a year now. I trust that we'll pick it back up this winter, probably January, February.
Do you face the same, the same problems that everyone else does with that foaming and
Oh
stickiness?
yeah, yeah. That's the 100% rye. That's the funk right there. The synthetic enzymes make it just not not as set it and forget it as bourbon. That is for sure. It is a high maintenance spirit.
And I know you're moving away from using the MGP. Is the proportions kind of about the same as they were with the bourbon? Like you're going down from 50-50, not in the North Coast, what you said is 50-50, but the the barrel proof, is it
Yes.
about the
No,
same?
the barrel proof is much heavier. The barrel proof rye is much heavier MGP than yeah, the barrel proof bourbon, the barrel proof rye, the barrel proof wheat are all just heavy MGP. Whereas the bottle proofs, actually even the well, like we talked about earlier, the bottle proof bourbon is heavy MGP 90-10, and then yeah, the North Coast is the 50-50.
Awesome. All right, I think we have almost reached the end here, and the last thing is just those experimentals. So in addition to the whatever that cask was that I saw, um, any other teasers you want to put out for casks or things coming out?
Yeah, so the mentioned the experimental series, or I guess it's the the trade name is the finishing series, which is what you sampled. I think you probably sampled the high rye bourbon finish in sherry casks. There's three expressions in that set. We're doing our first box set, which is the finishing series, a port finished bourbon, a sherry finished high rye bourbon, and a Cab Franc finished 100% rye. And they're just all super fun and bright. And yeah, the aromatics are just they're what you'd expect from a good quality wine barrel finish. Um, in addition to that, teasers for this year, we're probably a month, they're 2 months away from releasing our innovation calendar for 23. I will tell you there may be a cream liqueur in the set. Um,
Mhm.
of course, we have our distillery only releases for our distiller select around um, around July, our holiday edition around December, which we may be releasing our. When is this podcast being released?
This one's going to come out a couple weeks from now. I can give you a date a second. This will be on the 28th.
Okay, so this will be just following the release of our 2022 holiday edition. So yeah, we're selecting a couple fancy barrels to release at our gift shops on the 16th of this month, and we're going to do the same thing next year. And the other big fun event is going to be our Cherry Whiskeyfest, which is our annual release of the barrel proof cherry whiskey.
And like I said, I've gotten to attend two of them, both virtual, fortunately and unfortunately. But those
Yeah,
were some great times, and got to try some cherry whiskey that was really damn good. And again, got some of those cocktail cherries, which might have been an even better haul. I can't say which one was better.
yeah,
All right. So, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to, go through Traverse City Whiskey Company's um, some of the history, but also what more so what you're doing now and the just huge range of products. It's actually I'm going to grab a screenshot before we finish there, just so you can see. And the um, again, I urge people to go visit. It's really not only a great distillery, it's also a great place. Really enjoyed my time there. It's also the heart of wine country up there. If you're, plenty of wineries, not as many distilleries. Visit Traverse City Distillery, but you can be a little more promiscuous with the wineries. And just go try stuff. It's a beautiful place in the summer. Winter, I was there in May, and it was just perfect. So, Chris, hang out with me for a sec after we finish recording.
yeah.
And of course, like I said, there will be reviews and tasting notes and information about these releases coming out when the podcast goes live. Hopefully, on the 28th, there may still be a couple of those bottles of the holiday releases and special releases available. If not, you will know for next year. So put it on your calendar and you won't miss it. In the meantime, thanks so much for listening. It's been another episode of the Whiskey Ring Podcast. See you next week.